Tomato and basil, everybody. Tomato and
in this room and been fed, so I'm very grateful. And the last time it was a volunteer friend of mine, somebody who volunteers for Christian Aid, who was standing here speaking, and I've now got to live up to being as good as he is because I'm a team member for Christian Aid and hope that I can at least hold your attention as well as he did. It's really good to be here. Do you know this, just as a Christian bloke, this warms my heart to see this here today. Can I just say that? Just personally, aside from the badge, just this warms my heart to see people from different churches, different traditions, coming together, laughing together, serving one another and eating together. This is church to me. This is the faith. This is what we're around. And this is, well, we use the language in different contexts, some of us, but this is a foretaste of the heavenly kingdom, to break bread and share food together. So from my personal point of view, ignore the badge for a minute. I'm just saying thank you for the opportunity to share and be part of this, because it doesn't happen everywhere, believe you me. This is special. So thank you for that. And I've really enjoyed my soup, and I've been told not to mention which one I like. Just let me give a quick outline of what I'm hoping to do in a relatively few minutes this afternoon, and that is just to outline a little bit about this place. Some of the geography, which some of you will know well, and there's people in here who've been there, I'm sure there are, and people in here who've studied the theology and the history and all sorts of this place. But I will just give something what I think is important. I think is important to know about the place, something about people, something about the way we use words and labels on people and places. Why is Christian Aid speaking about Israel-Palestine? Who do we support? How do we raise funds? And then a little bit about the politics and a glimpse into some of the issues that arise because of the dispute, and maybe touching on some of the causes and the things that prolong that dispute that's going on there. But actually what I really want to major on for the Lent lunch is to look at some Bible passages. I lost count last night of how many different Bible passages, but every paragraph on here is a different quote from the Bible that I will be using and referring to. And if you want to know what they are, I can send them to you later, but these are just my Bible passages for reference. I would like us to try and have a prayerful think together of what the book says. On the table, to help us through, I'm going to refer to this quite a bit, because there's good stuff said in here that I don't need to say. You can take these away. I brought enough, I'm hoping there's sort of one between two can see it. If you look on the tables, I've put some extras out. Please just do help people see across and share with these. I'm really pleased that I haven't brought enough. It means there's more people here. It's good. It is. It's always good to run out of hymn books and chairs in the church. And then the other thing on the table is, you might like to have a look at this. If I get boring, just have a read of what's on the back of the card here. It's written by a colleague of mine, and it was a prayer card that was produced for Greenbelt some years ago, and these were produced by the thousands for Greenbelt. And I found some left over on the shelf, and I thought, oh, I'll bring those, because the words on here are good, and I'll take those away. I've got a few more in the office. If you don't get one, give me a name and address. I'll post them to you. And so that's where we're going. So, where we're talking about is this place on the map. We refer to it in Christian Aid as Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory and Gaza. Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory and Gaza. Israel, the Palestinian territories we're referring to, the West Bank is the occupied Palestinian territory. It's also referred to as the West Bank. It's called the West Bank because it is on the west of the River Jordan. It's just confused me because it's on the east of Israel, it's on the west of the Jordan. That's why it's called the West Bank of the River Jordan, which is the border between these two places and the country of Jordan. That's Gaza Strip. And then there's some other issues that I'd love to talk about but don't have the time today, like the Golan Heights and the northern farms and other things. I can only put so much in today. It's a place that's really on my heart. I've been here a lot for Christian Aid, outside of Christian Aid, with pilgrim trips, leading volunteer groups, taking MPs, bishops, doing voluntary work in the West Bank and in Israel, and it's a place that I think I know quite well, and I'm still in touch and daily read about and have friends over there. So I'm not just speaking to you because I've learnt this in a book. I've been there and done quite a lot, and it's fascinating. The biggest thing I think you can do if you're interested in this place is go if you're able. It's not a place to be frightened of. It's a really good place to go, and the Bible stories start to come alive. When you read a Bible story and you can go to the place that's named in the story, somehow it all just lights up. I know not everyone's able to, but if you can, it's great. We have a number of different labels for people here, and I'm being really careful about this. And I'm aware that I've got a badge on, and also I'm speaking sensitively and carefully. There's a number of different words we use to describe people, and I just want to outline what I mean by those words. Some of them you might want to debate with me, but this is what I'm meaning. I will talk probably about people called Jews. And that, to me, as I understand it, is a people of a particular ethnicity defined through their maternal line, that they can say they are Jewish. They are born of a Jewish line. Then there are people who are Arab. And Arabs, likewise, it's an ethnicity. It's a racial description. It's people who are from Arabic lines and Arab tribes and Arab families, and they would identify themselves as people who are Arabs. And then there are people who are Israelis. And there are Jews living in Israel as Israeli citizens, hardly surprising, but 20% of the population of Israel are Arabs who are living in Israel as Israeli citizens. And they are mainly in the north, in Galilee. Nazareth is a large Arab town in Israel, and everyone there is an Israeli citizen. But an Israeli is a citizen of Israel. Then there's a Palestinian, and this is where things can get a bit blurred. But Palestinians, in the way we're talking, are the people who live and they identify for themselves as their homes are in the West Bank and in Gaza, and some of them identify themselves as living in Israel. Some of the Arabs living in Israel will definitely want to be identified as Palestinians. Some people say most of them, I've met plenty who just say I want to be I'm not bothered, I want to be Israeli, but there's the Arabs in Israel will generally identify themselves as Palestinian Arabs, as opposed to Egyptian Arabs, Jordanian or Moroccan or any other Arab group. We talk about settlers and settlements. Settlers are Israelis who live in places within the West Bank that are not under Palestinian control. They are under the law and control of Israel, although they are villages, and some of them are large towns. Adullah, Modim, and various other towns, Ariel, are really large towns. But they are settlements inside the West Bank, and the only people allowed to live there are Jewish Israelis. and that is what they're built for. We use the word refugee a lot, and there's all sorts of people in this place who define themselves as refugees. People who still define themselves as refugees from the conflict that ended 70 years ago in Europe, whether they're Jewish, or some of them might call themselves Jewish-Palestinians, some of them call themselves the diaspora returned. There's all sorts of ways in which they still identify as refugees from Europe, from Russia, and of refugee families. And then there are refugees who are Arab Palestinians who fled from their villages in places that are now in Israel and now live in Gaza or the West Bank or Jordan or Lebanon or Syria or any other place because they fled in the war that created the State of Israel in 1948. The diaspora are people of any group who live dispersed away from where they consider to be their homeland. So there is a Jewish diaspora living around the world, and there is a Palestinian Arab diaspora living around this region and around the world. We also use the word Zionist quite a lot. Zionism is a political ideology. It's not a religion. In fact, a lot of the Zionists who I've met and talked to are non-believers. They are atheists. They are idealistic Zionists, political Zionists. But then there's a lot of Christian Zionists I meet, and I have lots of conversations with Christians in this country and elsewhere who identify themselves as Zionists. They seek the restoration and the strength and the continuation of the State of Israel and all it stands for, or all they want it to stand for. I've laboured that point quite a bit because there's so much trouble you can get into by using a word and someone hearing it and thinking you meant something other than what you meant. And I've stood quite a bit of criticism in the past. I speak on this topic quite a lot for Christian Aid and outside of Christian Aid. And I've learnt actually to take a little bit of time and just say this is what I'm meaning by these words. You might disagree with me, you might have another understanding of the word Zionist, but if you know where I'm coming from, then at least you know where the ground on which I'm standing. Christian Aid has been involved in this area. If you have a look on here, then in this book there's a whole timeline of the situation, but there's pages aren't numbered, so I'm going to find page 6. 1, 2, 3. It's that page there, it's written in my notes, see book page 6, there's no page numbers on it. But that explains a little bit about why Christian Aid is involved in the area. I'm not going to patronise anybody by simply reading something you can read for yourself, but Christian Aid has supported people in poverty in this area since the very beginning of since before the creation of the State of Israel, since 1947. Certainly since the State of Israel was declared in 48, and there was an internal refugee crisis of people suddenly becoming homeless. And Christian Aid has been working with all sorts of people in this region for the last nearly 70 years. Christian Aid hasn't been called Christian Aid for nearly 70 years, but it's the same charities. The Committee for Relief of Refugees is actually how it was founded. Just a little aside, did you know Christian Aid is 70 years old this year? There's quite a bit of stuff on our website about it, obviously, and it was founded. I was fascinated to see how Christian Aid was founded. It wasn't a group of people who had a bright idea and then went to the church and asked for money. It was people in the pews and the seats of our churches in this country immediately after the Second World War was declared to be over, who said, we have to do something for these people who are in need. And in the very first months of this beginning, then aid was being delivered to Germans who are homeless in Germany and around Europe, who fled Europe. People who had been months before considered enemies were being supported by money raised in churches in this country. And I think that has set the tone really for the work of Christian Aid ever since. Our work is now much more diversified, but Christian Aid will work with anybody in need, regardless of their faith. or no faith. It's need that is the driver. The other driver is there something there that can practically and reliably deliver a benefit to these people? Is there some channel we can work through? And we call those channels local partners. We don't send people out to do stuff. We find local partners on the ground. So that takes me to suggest who is it that we support in the area. And there's currently 21 different partners for this moment. And again, if you'd like to take one of these away, all this information is here. And I've just put a brief summary of each of the partners we support in Israel, in Gaza, in the occupied territory of the West Bank. And you'll see there's a whole mix of organisations there. There are Jewish, Israeli organisations, there are Israeli organisations that are mixed, Arab and Jewish, there are Palestinian groups working just in the West Bank or just in Gaza, there are Israeli groups that go illegally into the West Bank and deliver help to people, because citizens of Israel are technically forbidden to go into the West Bank, but a lot do, especially a whole load of doctors called the Physicians for Human Rights Israel is a fantastic organisation that crossed the border. And we support, I think it's a wide variety of different groups. Some are actually delivering food to the hungry, medical care to those in need, and others are delivering campaigning tools for people to speak out about the situation and to get the root cause of the poverty changed. So what do we believe are root causes of the poverty that we're dealing with? Well, the poverty is in the occupied territory of the West Bank and in Gaza, where there are 70% unemployment in places in Gaza, where families are living below the poverty line, struggling to survive on less than $2 a day, and there is real, palpable, genuine poverty. When you take a walk through some of the back areas of Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, if you go into Alia area of Bethlehem, and you see the poverty that is there, or certainly in the streets of Gaza, or in the back end of Ramallah, or up into Tulkarem, or any of these places in the West Bank, you will find real, heartbreaking, genuine poverty. We're hearing stories of children in this winter literally freezing to death because there is nothing to heat the homes and not enough to shelter the family where houses have been destroyed. And it is desperate. And just across the border you have a first world country. If you go to Tel Aviv, it's skyscrapers and beaches and cocktails on the beach and all sorts. It's very real. And one of the major causes of poverty in the West Bank, this area, has been for a long time the settlements. The settlements that are being built all over this area. Something like 200 plus settlements in that area, where land has been taken, usually on a hilltop, with the associated farmland around it, has been fenced off, is protected by an army, the Israeli army, the IDF, Israeli Defence Force, and is for use by Jewish Israelis only. And the Palestinian farmers who had that land, who earned a living from that land, no longer have access to it. And that is an ongoing, increasing problem and source of poverty. There is no disguising it. I'm not building up a political thing there. It's a truth. And you can read about it yourselves. Along with that, now since 2003, there's an area that is variously called the seam, or the separation barrier, or the security barrier, depending on the language that is used. And it is a physical wall in a lot of places, or a very wide fence complex in others, actually physically separating the territory of the West Bank from the country of Israel. And it is just, where it is a wall like in Bethlehem, there's some pictures of it in that book, 9 metres high, completely shutting people off from one another. People no longer see each other, no longer see what life is like across the other side of a hillside. because there is a wall between the two. And in vast areas of the more open country, further up in this area here, it's a fence complex, which consists of a security road, a full-width tarmac road. Either side of that there is flat sand area, then there's a deep ditch, then there's an electrified fence, and that is the boundary, that is the complex. It's something like 150 metres fence to fence. It separates out. Now that's been built for really good reasons. Israel will call it a security barrier, and it has made them more secure. Since what was called the Second Intifada, some people say it's uprising, it's more like shaking off in Arabic. But in a conflict that arose in late 2000, September 2000 it began, there was an increase in the number of bus bombings in Israel, where terrorists who were from the Palestinian territory or from Gaza would come in to Israel and would blow themselves up on buses, in markets, in restaurants. And there was a horrible period of a few years where this was happening. And I have personally seen the results of these in a restaurant and in the market. And it is truly atrocious. And since the barrier has been built, that has been virtually ended. So it certainly has done something. The problem with it is that it is not on the green line, it's not on the border between the two that is internationally recognised. Only 11% of it is, most of it is on the Palestinian land, which is dividing Palestinian communities from their farmland in a lot of places again. And also restricts the movement. I remember back in the 90s going into Bethlehem and watching tens of thousands, or thousands in Bethlehem, tens of thousands in Gaza, of Palestinians queuing up to get their pass stamped, and they went out to work in Israel. And they had jobs in Israel and they took earnings back. And the produce that was grown in the West Bank and in Gaza, soft fruits in Gaza, delicious, were travelled all across Europe and around the area. They were able to export them through the barrier, through the roads, across the borders, and that has virtually ceased because there are so few crossing points and they're all controlled by an army. It is a real cause of poverty and of separation as well as security. Some of the areas where the wall has been built, you can see, are right in protecting some of the big settlements, and some are completely walling off Arab towns. The town of Tulkarem, which is a little blob there, is actually completely surrounded, and everyone has to have a permit to get in or out of the town. That means going to hospital, going to college, going to visit friends, celebrating birthdays, going to weddings, just life is very difficult. This is what the Bethlehem, part of the Bethlehem checkpoint looks like as people gather at 4 o'clock in the morning, those few who can still get permits to go and just queue up to try and get through. It's like a cattle grid. The one in Gaza is even worse. Through the process of settlements and the barriers and checkpoints and roads to settlements, this is a map you will find in a lot of places that people use to show how the land available to Palestinian people in the West Bank is diminishing. This is how land was not divided, but where the population tended to live in the mid 1940s. The dark colour being where Arab Palestinians tended to live, and the light colour being where Jews tended to live. There was a settlement, UN partition plan suggested. There was a war, a battle, and this is where the ceasefire lines settled. But now the settlements and the secure areas around settlements have meant that the Palestinians' access to land is severely restricted and is getting smaller all the while. Talking about Gaza, again a place I've been to quite a few times. It's a really small area, Gaza. The entire border is only 60-something miles round, and it's about 5 miles, 6 miles across at its narrowest and 20 miles long. It's a really small area. It's completely fenced in. Nothing comes in or out without the IDF saying so. And you know that in the last few years there have been 2 serious conflicts there. There was some rebuilding when that finished, and again in July of 2014 to August, it all began again and kicked off again. My colleague was there a couple of months ago, and as he left, one child in Khan Yunis said to him, "See you next time after the next war." That is just the expectation in Gaza at the moment. The tensions are building up, and it is going to happen again. The situation in Gaza is absolutely dire at the moment. There are, in the last conflict last year, in the end of the summer last year, 7,000 homes were completely destroyed. They were homes to 10,000 families. 89,000 homes were damaged, of which 10,000 were made uninhabitable, as well as the 7,000 completely destroyed. You've got 500,000 people made homeless in a population of 1.5 to 1.75 million. The situation is awful. There is no rebuilding materials. It only goes in with the say-so of Israel. The international community has promised, the governments of the world have promised so much money to help rebuild Gaza, and so little is actually being delivered. It is a nightmare situation, and it's terrible there at the moment.
You've got a border there with Egypt. Tell us about that.
The border with Egypt and the Rafah, that's down there. This here is in the control nominally of Egypt, but there's a large Israeli influence on it. There's the tunnels, is that what you were asking about? The tunnels under here are the source of a lot of Hamas's power. I'd love to have the time to go into the politics of it, but Hamas they were elected, but they're an extreme group by anyone's standards. They are extreme. They're published on their website. If you look, they claim the whole of the land from the river to the sea as Palestinian. Very similar to if you look at the Israeli tourist board map of Israel, which is from the river to the sea. But this is why you've got what seems to be an intractable problem. You've got tunnels. There have been a load of tunnels under here, and to some extent under other parts of the border, through which all sorts of materials were smuggled. And the people in control of the tunnels, therefore, have become wealthy and in charge of being able to give favour and gain favour within Gaza. A lot of those tunnels have been destroyed, but not all of them. And I wonder why. There are still some tunnels operating and stuff is still being smuggled under. But it is close. It's not easy for Palestinians to get out and into Egypt or leave the country. But it is certainly more open than Erez in the north, which are the only 2 pedestrian, if you like, checkpoints in and out. Does that answer the question? What I wanted to do was paint a situation and tell you why Christian Aid is involved. Christian Aid is involved, if you look at the range of partners there, it's not just about giving aid to those who are homeless or hungry or naked or thirsty. It's also about working with civil groups that are working for peace. There are all sorts of agencies working for peace that are supported by Christian Aid. The Parents Circle is an amazing one, which brings together people in Israel and people in the Palestinian territories who have lost children through either terrorist attack or by being killed by the Israeli army. And they bring them together and they talk, and then they get onto Israeli media about their experiences of meeting and talking one with another. There's a whole group of Israeli ex-service people who speak out about the situations they have seen while they've been serving, And they are very active in Israel in speaking for peace and speaking for a solution to this crisis. And if you have a look on that sheet, there's a whole number of them that we support over there. But what actually, all sorts of groups speak out for peace over there. But why do I do that with the word Christian on me? And I would like to just explore that a bit. What is it about me as a Christian, us as Christians, that helps us understand this and helps us respond to this situation? There's any number of ways of looking at Bible passages that can get bandied around, and Christians can end up arguing one with another about what things mean. And so really what I'm offering is a point of view. And the reason for saying the few things that I'm going to say in a minute is to try and provoke some thought, and to try and provoke Christian people to go back to the text of the book we call Holy, and to look at it and say, what does this say into this situation? How do I pray about this situation? Who do I respond to in this situation? And just let's try and have a think about it from a Christian point of view. A lot is said about land, that land was promised to a certain people. And certainly it is. There's promises to Abraham and his descendants in the Bible that they will have a land as their permanent inheritance. But there's also a lot that indicates there's conditions on this, that God puts conditions on it. Joshua 1 says, defines the land as being from the Negev to Lebanon, from the Euphrates to the Mediterranean, which is a huge swathe of land. But says that you have to be careful to obey. If you turn away and ally yourselves with survivors of nations that remain among you, and if you intermarry with them and associate with them, then you may be sure the Lord your God will no longer drive these nations out before you. There's other bits in Joshua in Joshua 7, where God says Israel has sinned, and that is why they're being defeated and why they're having to run away, and they're not claiming the land at that point. And in Joshua 23, right near the end, it's saying, be careful to love the Lord your God, or you will vanish from the land. I'm not saying this is God threatening the people who are there now. Don't hear me say that. What I'm saying is things are sometimes not as clear-cut as we may read the Old Testament to be. The extent of the kingdom is quite interesting to look at. And did they ever control from the Euphrates to the Nile? Well, maybe David did. There's a little hint in 2 Samuel, that he may have reinforced his troops up near the Euphrates. But then there are other bits of the Bible that say some of the land that is currently part of Israel is to be held in by God for the people of Esau. In other words, Arab people. Deuteronomy 2. There's a whole area of land described around a place called Seir, now near Beersheba, which says, do not take this land, it is for the people of Esau. All I'm saying is, you can go to the Old Testament and you can look at one little bit about a promise of land and forget that there's a whole hundreds of years of history of different things that God is saying to people at different times in there. And if we're going to hold on to one piece of the Bible, then we need to get an understanding of what the breadth of it says. But there's actually a piece in the New Testament that challenges me most. And this is something I was thinking of recently, and I just want to share it with you again for you to think about. And that's the story of the Transfiguration. You're familiar maybe with the story where Jesus and Peter and James and John go up onto the top of a hill, and suddenly there's a bright light, and with Jesus they recognise two people who are Elijah and Moses. Yeah? Ever wondered how they recognised him? Because Moses, unlike there was actually a Facebook page, where you can look and say, oh yeah, this is Moses. There were no paintings, there were no photographs, there was no artwork. So there must be something about the way we will be with our eternal bodies that will mean we're not going to struggle to remember names. I'm going to look and say, oh yeah, that's David. He knows me. Just a side. But the important thing to me about that story is that here is Moses, the giver of law, and here is Elijah representing the prophets. But God's voice from heaven speaks and says, this is my son, listen to him. I just want to offer you a suggestion for you to take away and think about. That when Moses says, the law of Moses says, if a woman is found in adultery, she should be stoned. Jesus says, the one among you without sin, cast the first stone. You go and sin no more. This is my son, listen to him. When the law says this, what does Jesus say? And when the prophet calls down fire upon the enemies of God to utterly destroy them, Jesus says, love your enemies, pray for those that persecute you, blessed are the peacemakers. And I find a challenge there in thinking that when we are talking about the politics of this land and the ways in which we want to claim promises in the Old Testament, actually what we need to do is go back to the person of Jesus. Because through Jesus, you and I are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, ambassadors of the King. And in Jesus, all the law is fulfilled and all the prophecy has come true. There is no more need for sacrifice. There's no more need for a temple, because in Christ there is the full and supreme, complete sacrifice made for you and for me to have this child relationship with the Father God, which is incredible when you think about it. It's not about law. It's not about property. And the Bible makes it quite clear that this will be a problem to some people. That it says that Jesus will be a stone on which some will build and over which others will stumble. Peter talks about it, and it says, this is Jesus, the stone over which some people will stumble and on which some people will build. Trying to work out where we go, so I'm aware of the time. I would just encourage us when we look at what is happening in Israel and Palestine and say, how then shall we respond? To not too easily drop into one theology or another, but to actually say, what is the Bible saying? How do I feel I can respond honestly in my faith to the situation there? How do I pray about this? How do I read the Bible? How do I understand the Old Testament in the light of knowing that I have a relationship with Jesus? How do I understand the chosen people in the Old Testament when I read the New Testament sections on being a chosen person myself, being part of this royal priesthood? How do I understand this desire of some people to rebuild a temple where there will be reinstitution of sacrifices, when in Jesus there is now no need for sacrifice because it has all been made on the cross and through the empty tomb that we'll celebrate in just a few weeks' time. And to say, well, we can respond generously to those who are in need, but also we can speak out, we can learn about the situation, we can read more about it. We can not just turn away and say this is just too difficult to understand. But we can say I'm going to try and get to grips with some of this. And then we can pray informedly about it. We sometimes pray for peace, and it's just an easy thing to pray for. But what if God wants us to be part of the process that is being peacemakers? What if God wants us to say something to somebody, to write a letter to somebody, to engage our brains and then our mouths so that we can become advocates for a real and lasting peace that brings justice to everyone in this situation? Maybe a lot of what I've said has not made a lot of sense. And I'm just trying to unpack briefly something that's deep in my heart and weighs heavy on me. But the situation over there is dire. Christian Aid is involved and engaged with a broad spectrum of people responding to give help to those in need, but also to those who are working to change the situation and challenge the situation. We have ways of encouraging us as people who engage in the democratic process in this country and in Europe to speak out about the way this country and our European Union deals with Israel and with Palestine. And as people of faith, people who know Jesus, people who are children of the Father in heaven, we're called to pray in a way that is informed, to intercede for the situation there, which means understanding something about it. I'm sure I've raised more questions, perhaps even sown some confusion, perhaps even not answered where you thought I was going. But I've tried to just unpack something at a Lent lunch that is on my heart about this situation and how to respond. I'm not going to dash off. If you've got any questions, or if you can't get hold of a copy of something that's on the table and you want it, then just speak to me and I'll put something in the post. Thank you very much.
Just make a comment.
Yeah.